In May of 2010, 39 American Jews went to Poland in search of ancestral roots. Some found the origins of their families. Through the prism of what I discovered of my own family's origin, I shall tell the story of this mission. I am Rabbi Merle Singer, standing at the front door of the Morgenstern family home in Koch, Poland. Until the Nazis invaded Poland in 1939, this was home to the family of one of the early masters of Hasidic Judaism, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Morgenstern, known as the Kotzker Rabbi. I am a sixth-generation descendant of Menachem Mendel, and this is the story of a Routes to Roots discovered. In May of 2010, Myra and I, along with our Jewish educator and Holocaust survivor, Rose Rosenkrantz, with Sally Halpern of Essential Meeting Services, led a Routes to Roots journey to Poland. For me, the journey began in Piszczatz, Poland. This is where my mother was born and the place of my Polish rabbinic roots. Seen in a picture created from family stories and from the last photograph taken in Poland of my mother and grandmother before they immigrated to America in 1914. I grew up in northern Minnesota, about as far as one could get from the life and culture of my Polish ancestry. That is, until the stories of our European past began to be recalled, and I went in search of a rapidly disappearing family history. Which brings us to the story of our journey to Poland, discovering the routes to our roots, Poland, May 2010. On the way to Poland, in Berlin, not far from the remnants of Hitler's chancellery, on the fragments of a wall that once divided east from west, is the graffiti. Many small people who in many small places do many small things can alter the face of the world. Truth from a bitter past. If it only had come sooner to the Jewish world, a world that our Routes to Roots Poland mission sought to discover. Throughout our journey, not only did we mourn this loss, honoring its survivors, but in so many personal ways, committed to ensure our Jewish survival. This then is the story of our journey. 39 of us from Texas, Minnesota, North Carolina, and Florida, and one teddy bear named Sam made up our mission. Many of us came with questions searching for answers. Where did our family come from? What was the landscape that formed the background to 1,000 years of Polish-Jewish history? We wanted to taste the food. We wanted to walk the path, meet the people who once knew our people, and find the answer to a lot of whys and whats that happened here on this soil, to our people, to our culture, to our way of life. Why so many stayed? Why so many left? Why so many who made their home in Poland are now just a distant memory? Why was the Jewish community of Poland destroyed? And why? Why would a Jew ever want to return to Poland? Through the magic of stories recalled on this journey, we found ourselves in the presence of loved ones. They and the culture they lived once again became our precious legacy. As the pace of our itinerary increased, so did our questions. The hours never seemed long enough. Day blended into night, as our flagging energy would suddenly burst out in a flurry of mind-probing and faith-challenging queries. Almost like the circular staircase found in the Warsaw Royal Palace, our minds would chase down conclusion after conclusion, only to realize that the question led not to answers, but begged further mind-teasing queries. It helped to keep our sense of humor, as these pictures from the Warsaw Cemetery demonstrate. When I went in search of the family tombs, I did find the grave of one of my ancestors, the Rabbi of Sokolov. But when I reached the grave of another, I found my nephew Jack, getting down and up close and personal with some very ancient relatives. This picture was taken in the old Warsaw Jewish neighborhood of Praga. Praga survived the war, so you can still see the original buildings that make up this once thriving Jewish community. Here is the academy that such luminaries of the Jewish world as Israel's first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, attended in his youth. The community mikveh, this sign on a building, advertising in Yiddish the shop of a Jewish tailor. Or this doorway where once hung a mezuzah, part of a courtyard complex typical of its day. The spring rains didn't darken our spirits, and travels with dialogue is what this journey was all about. Beyond traveling the Polish landscape, we engaged in dialogue. Our journey began with our being invited to view the new Poland, one that is struggling with the loss of its once large Jewish presence. One Polish man I met on the streets of Krakow described this void saying, "The Jew was the jewel in the crown of Polish life, a jewel that gave Polish culture a luster and beauty never to be found again, that is until Jewish life hopefully returns to Poland." We met with Andrzej Falwarczna, former member of the Polish Parliament and chairman of the Polish-Israeli Parliamentary Group, now president and the founder of the Forum for Dialogue Among Nations. The Forum is a Polish NGO that seeks to educate Polish Christian high school students about their lost Jewish communities. If prejudice is the child of ignorance, then education is the pathway to reconciliation of Christian Pole and Jew. I am grateful to Andrzej and his work, and hope that we can be supportive of his efforts. One of our families on the mission joined in sponsoring a year of dialogue in a high school in the Polish provinces. I am, as I hope you too, will continue to work with this most worthwhile project. We also met with the author of the History of Jewish Community of Tokochin, Mogens Kilgard. It was in Tokochin, a Polish town near Białystok, that for 400 years boasted a rich and thriving Jewish community, where we celebrated Rose Rosenkrantz's bat mitzvah, the reading of Torah by Marlene Bluestein, and the conversion to Judaism of Natalie Burns. Rose was born in a Russian gulag and was the only child to survive. We not only lived history, but made history as the celebration of women reading Torah and converting to Judaism had never occurred before in the Tokochin synagogue. In Tokochin is the oldest Orthodox Jewish cemetery in Poland, which today has become a cow pasture. Hopefully, as the historic gravestones are uncovered, Jewish history will be restored and sacred memories recalled. Before leaving Tokochin, we visited the farm that once belonged to Mogen's wife's father. Here stood the barn where this brave Polish family, from their Nazi hunters, hid 3 young Jewish girls. For 400 years, Jews lived in Tokochin, famous as a center of tallis makers. For 14 generations, Tokochin was largely a Jewish town. Not anymore. The end came quickly, on August 26th and 27th, 1941, when special Nazi forces murdered the entire community. The machine guns went non-stop for 2 days. Today, all that is left are 3 mass graves carved out of the forest. At the dedication of the memorial in the forest, the mayor of Tokochin said, "The tragedy is that the victims were children, young people, grown-ups, and elderly. Whole families were murdered completely without reason. They were innocent. The echo of this crime was heard not only in Tokochin, but also around the world. Never, never shall we forget them." Mogens tells of an old Jewish woman from Warsaw who came to Tokochin. She went to the synagogue and looked around in silence. Then sadly she said, "A synagogue without God and without Jews." The woman left and never came back. But we came as Jews to bear witness to the indomitable will of our people to survive. Warsaw and Tocochin formed a unique beginning to our journey. Up early, we were off through the countryside to the picturesque Kazimierz Dolny and Lublin. When we arrived at our hotel, some of us, after dinner, took a walk through Old Town. Walking through the mist of night, I recalled my mother's childhood memory of Lublin. When my mother and I got off the train from our little village of Piszczা, arriving in Lublin, she nostalgically recalled, streetlights. There were streetlights. I had never seen streetlights before. It was magical. The streetlights were like necklaces of dancing light. The streets of Lublin were the most beautiful sight I had ever seen. Up before dawn, we were on the train to Krakow. Our first stop, Kazimierz, the former Jewish quarter, defies easy description. It's at once a tumble-down former ghetto, filled with haunting artifacts of a culture uprooted and destroyed a generation ago. It also happens to be Krakow's coolest nightclub district, filled with cafes, cocktail bars, and trendy eateries that would not be out of place in New York Soho or East Village. The Ramuz Synagogue, named for Rabbi Moses Isserles, the synagogue was built in 1553. Next to the synagogue is the ancient Krakow graveyard, which still operates today. The temple is the large synagogue opened in 1860, affiliated with the Jewish Enlightenment, the Haskalah, and Reform Judaism. Krakow is one of the most beautiful cities in Central Europe. The city escaped serious damage during World War II, and its only real rival for pure drop-dead beauty is the Czech capital, Prague. The size and formal perfection of its enormous central square is breathtaking, and the little lanes that fan off it in all directions ooze with charm. In addition to the Old Town, there's the charming storybook Wawel Castle, home to Poland's earliest royal rulers. A short distance from Krakow is the oldest working salt mine open for tourists in all of Europe. representing over 700 years of mining. Hidden below the town, 370 meters deep, we find 300 kilometers of galleries filled with amazing salt sculptures and murals left by the miners. They look amazing, and they taste like salt. During World War II, Jewish slave laborers were forced into the mines to build the V-2 rockets. Majdanek concentration camp. Majdanek was unusual in that it was located in the populated area of Lublin, not hidden away in some remote location. Often the citizens of Lublin would complain that they couldn't hang their laundry out to dry without becoming fouled by soot from the camp's chimneys. And they said they didn't know what was happening to the Jews in Majdanek. The Majdanek mausoleum contains 7 tons of ashes, all that remains of 350,000 Jewish men, women, and children. Outside the crematoria, the Nazis planted a rose garden, fertilized by the ashes of our bubbies, our zadis, our families we will never know. We entered the gas chamber. Come with me as I take you through a barrack strewn with shoes, many of them the shoes of children. One particular shoe catches my eye. I know this shoe. I look around and see it's one of hundreds of shoes once worn by infants, toddlers, young boys and girls, and teenagers. But this shoe is different. I used to wear this shoe. Mine had a star in the middle of its patch. Mine was a Chuck Taylor, an unbleached white high top known simply as a whitey. For a moment I searched the heap for its mate, but there are so many others, and does it really matter? The canvas shoe has lain untouched for almost 60 years. 7 rusting grommets, the circle patch decaying at the ankle. But what of the little boy who once ran and played in this shoe? Who was he? For a moment I imagined the picture of his first sunrise over the sea, the family's summer vacations to Lake Pulamets, the day he went fishing with his dad and caught all those fish, his little sister with her friends playing and singing, Ring Around the Rosies, a pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes. What is this all about? Why did it have to happen? What could this child have done to deserve this? He and the 1.5 million boys and girls murdered by Hitler. My tears flow faster than my questions. Auschwitz, a concentration, forced labor, and extermination camp established by the Germans. It has been called the largest graveyard in human history and has become a symbol of the Holocaust itself. Trains arrived at Auschwitz-Birkenau daily, with Jews from almost every German-occupied country in Europe. The new arrivals underwent a process of selection. The majority, including all of the old people, the young, mothers with children, were sent directly to the gas chambers. Those chosen for forced labor were tattooed with their camp numbers on their left arms. It is estimated that 1,600,000 people were murdered in Birkenau, over 90% Jews. All Polish school children are required to study the Holocaust and to visit Auschwitz. I thought I understood the Holocaust. I studied the pages of history upon which are written the story of man's inhumanity to man. I taught about the Holocaust, analyzing in the most intellectual of fashions the causes of Hitler's maddening rise to power, the Treaty of Versailles, the economic punishment of Germany by the world for World War I, the rise of communism in the East, and the fear of communism from the industrial West, the flames of bigotry fanned by church-inspired hatred of the Jew from the Middle Ages on down, the silence of a world gone morally dead, loudly proclaiming, "The Jew is expendable." In the classroom, it all added up. All the facts were accountable. But standing in Poland, here in the death camps, face to face with what remains, suitcases, brushes, eyeglasses, piles and piles of shoes, blankets made from human hair, 2 tons of human hair, tully tote, and family pictures. This nightmare suddenly didn't make sense anymore. Standing here in Poland, I began to think that maybe an understanding of the Holocaust is like an understanding of God. Once you begin to think you understand, you realize that an understanding is not humanly possible. We can only catch glimpses of what levels of depravity the human will sink to. And it is these glimpses that we must remember and teach the world. We met this gentleman who is 90 years old and a survivor of Auschwitz. He came here to see where he spent his youth. Sammy the Jewish Bear. Let me introduce you to Sammy. Margie Rogozinski, ever the teacher, brought Sammy the Jewish Bear on our journey so that our third grade students could experience our journey through Sammy's eyes. Sammy went wherever we went, except the concentration camps. There he waited for us outside the gates. An experience involving Sammy returns us to the challenging questions of our journey. On our last day together, we were touring the picturesque Wawel Castle in Krakow. Margie, spotting 2 young Polish soldiers, asked them to pose for a picture with Sammy. At first they agreed, but then seeing the Star of David on Sammy's chest, they refused to have their picture taken with our Jewish bear. Some of us were shocked at what appeared to be an outrageous act of anti-Semitism. Comments flew through the group. Just show a Pole a Jew, and in seconds you have an anti-Semite. See, I told you, the Poles drink anti-Semitism with their mother's milk. Finally, it was Jack Modell who challenged. How do you know it's anti-Semitism? Why is that the immediate assumption? They were 2 young soldiers. Could they not just be overly cautious of posing for a picture while in army uniform, with what may be interpreted as a political symbol? Most militaries have rules against that sort of thing, and in today's world, a simple, cute picture could turn up on the internet and get them in a heap of trouble. Or could it just be simple ignorance or misunderstanding? Especially since we couldn't communicate with them. We just don't know. But when I shared this thought with the group, saying, look what just happened. We met 2 people who may not be conforming to our point of view, and we were ready to condemn an entire nation for it, using it as proof of a preconceived notion? Isn't that the kind of stereotyping the Nazi propaganda machine used against us? Rose then challenged me, saying, Rabbi, don't whitewash anti-Semitism when you see it. I wanted to ignore Rose's comment as a lingering vestige of Jewish paranoia. But then I asked myself, what attitude would have led to survival during the Holocaust? The Jew who believed the Nazis could be reasoned with, and therefore, if we Jews just did what the Nazis told us to do, we could convince Hitler and his minions of the fallacy of their beliefs, and so reason our way to survival, and perhaps even peaceful coexistence with them. I shuddered as I followed that thought to conclusion, seeing one Jewish community after another being led to slaughter in mass graves that fill the Polish landscape. But then again, is this the whole answer? Yes, survival requires us to defend against injustice, to go to war if necessary. As the Talmud said so many centuries ago, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? Yet the rest of that sentence need also be heard. If I'm only for myself, what am I? Before we give in to the base desire to see the other as an enemy to be destroyed, let there be an opportunity for each of us to see the other as a vulnerable human being with the same pain, fear, and hope as is ours. At the beginning of our journey, we believed our questions would find answers. Yet the more we questioned, the more our once seemingly obvious answers lead us deeper into a complex quagmire of unanswered questions. The challenge leveled by my sister Sharon's roommate, her friend of many years, Molly Thibodeau. Molly is a Roman Catholic. At one time in our journey, the group was lamenting how very few Poles were willing to risk their and their family's safety to save Jews. Molly turned to me and whispered, "And if the situation were reversed, how many Jews would put their families at risk to save Catholics?" A short while later, I asked the group Molly's question and was met with stunned silence. On our last night together, a moment of truth. At our farewell banquet in Krakow at the Klezmerhuis, we found ourselves seated with a group of tourists. They were Christian neighbors from a small German village on holiday in Poland, with one couple of the group who was from Poland. At the start of the evening, there were those among us disturbed that we had to share our last night in Poland with Germans, whom some not so quietly began calling Nazis. How easy it is to let petty annoyances spark old prejudices. For old prejudice never die. They just lie in wait in the recesses of frightened minds. What fate had brought our groups together? Neither of us spoke much of the other's language, but what we experienced went way beyond words. For as the klezmer band began to play, some of us got up to dance, only to be joined by members of the German group. As the band played Sholem Aleichem, we started to sing, as did some of the German group. As we celebrated Havdalah with the candlestick from Rose's family, rescued from the Holocaust, they shared respectfully with us. Then one of our group, Dr. Abe Rogozinski, began to talk with a man from their group, whose name is Lutz. Lutz looked at Abe and in his broken English said, "There is something you should know about me. My father is an unrepentant Nazi, and I have to live with that." Abe replied, "My mother has numbers tattooed on her arm. She is a survivor of Auschwitz." 2 days later, and 170 miles away in a park in Warsaw, a few from our group who remained in Poland after the tour met a woman who was part of that German tourist party in Krakow. In an email to Jack Modell, she later wrote, "After you left us in the restaurant, we sat and talked our impressions of Poland, which were much more sustainable after meeting you. We were deeply touched, And the next day my friend Lutz told me that he counts himself lucky to be part of this memorable evening. Thank you all for all, and with best wishes from Germany. Beyond moral equivalence is the challenge. Can we, the survivors, children of survivors, and grandchildren of survivors, appreciate the turmoil within the child, grandchild, and even great-grandchild of a Nazi, as they come to recognize and live with the depraved legacy of their otherwise beloved patriarch? For the family of the Nazi, the challenge is to feel the pain, loss, and suffering that pulls and tugs with every beat of the Jewish heart. A survivor of the Plaskov camp made famous by Schindler's List said after meeting the daughter of the murderous Commandant Goth, "I cannot and will not forgive, I cannot and will not forget, but I will not hate, for to hate makes me no better than them." Part of the healing process of our dinner in Krakow, and one of the real lessons of this mission, is that as horrible as the Holocaust was, and as much as we must never forget to prevent it happening again, we can rejoice in today's world. We can live our lives our ancestors had taken from them. We can live our lives in their memory, in honor to them, as fully and completely and as free of hate and prejudice as possible. We came to Poland in search of answers, and we left with an understanding that more important than finding so-called answers is the sacred search for answers. Perhaps I can explain it this way. My great ancestor, whose roots I came to Poland in search of, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Morgenstern, the Kotzker Rebbe, said, "The true worship of God was not found in finding the truth, but rather in an honest search for it." And that, my friends, is what this journey has been all about.